Hello everybody, Lord Zeno here. Today I'm going to be doing a little something different. I don't usually do Blender tutorials, but I don't know, I just felt like making one today. So as you can probably tell from the title, I'm going to be showing you how to crush your dog using VFX in Blender. This is a beginner tutorial, so even if you've never opened a Blender in your life, or the program even, you should be fine. I'm going to start by switching my render engine to Cycles because I prefer to use Cycles, but it's fine, you can use Eevee as well. I think when I originally did this effect, I believe I also used Eevee. I'm also going to lower my sample size and up the noise threshold. This is because if you're using Cycles and you don't really care too much about like it needing to be super high quality of the render, then you should be perfectly fine just upping the noise threshold and lowering these samples here, because lowering the sample size and upping the noise threshold is just going to make your render time a lot shorter. And if you, as long as you have denoising on, you're really not losing much by doing that. Also, make sure for this you have transparent on, because we're going to be overlaying this onto our background clip that we're going to be using. So first thing you're going to need before you even do anything here is you're going to need two clips. First, you're going to need a clip of your subject, this being my dog in this case, and then you're going to need a clean plate, which needs to be a shot that is exactly the same as the shot with the dog in it, just with the dog out of the shot. Make sure you also focus lighting on your shot, that way that it doesn't have an autofocus on. If you have like an autofocus or anything like that, make sure to turn that off on your camera, otherwise it's going to mess this up for the most part. We're not doing any masking, so it's not going to be super noticeable, but it's preferred that you actually don't have those on. First thing we're going to need to do is go to a camera, open up the background images, add an image. We're going to go to movie clip, and then you're just going to need to open up whatever clip you have. So now I have my clip here of my dog. What we can start by doing is going to our settings on our camera here and switching it to front. That way we can always see our subject here. And we're going to need to start by positioning our camera in this scene. Keep in mind that the default cube is 1 meter by 1 meter. So if I press shift and tilde to switch to first person mode, tilde is that little funny key next to the 1, the little squiggly line if you don't know. And we're just going to move around with WASD when we're in first person like this to just try and line up the cube with this scene. Try and make it look like it's sitting on the floor. So now we have our cube about lined up properly, and now what we're going to need to do is create a floor, and we're going to need to create a wall. We can start by clicking on our cube here, pressing Shift D, and then make sure snapping's on, press Z, and you can hold down Control to make sure it snaps. And I'm just going to put it directly underneath my cube here to make a floor. I'm also going to go to the transform properties on this, and I'm going to change on the X and Y axis. I'm going to just scale it up so that it is about big enough for my scene. Now we're going to continue making our geometry of our scene. You can just go ahead and rename the floor object floor, and then we're just going to click Shift D again, hold down Control, make sure you press Z as well. Don't have to hold it down, just press it once and it will snap to the Z axis. And now we have a nice wall here. I don't know if it needs to be that big. I think this should be about good. I'm also going to move it down a little bit and look at my camera view again. Boom, now I have a wall and a floor. I could also make that little bin next to him and a couple of the other boxes and stuff there, but it's not really necessary. I just need these two bits here. Okay, so one thing I'm noticing is my camera, actually like my footage, is a little crooked, but that's okay. I can just take my camera itself and rotate it to match the rotation of the footage. So now we can just bring in whatever model you want to crush your dog. If you want to crush your dog with the cube, that's fine. You can just use the default cube, but I'm going to use a barrel. So I'm going to go and I'm going to go to File, Import. I'm going to import an FBX file, and then I'm going to find my barrel and import that. Now I have my barrel. I'm going to scale it up to match my scene, like so. Alright, so now I have my barrel in here and I have all my scenery. However, if I go into the render view, one thing you'll notice is that, one, my barrel is pink, and two, we can actually see these two walls here. There's an easy way to fix this. First, we're going to click on our little box here, go to the transform properties of it, and go to visibility. Then we can set it to a shadow catcher, and this pretty much means that it's going to show in the render because we have it set to show in render. but it's only going to show the shadows, so the actual box itself is not going to show up. Let me show you what I mean. If I go to render view now you see there's still shadows here, but we don't actually see the wall and floor, which is exactly what we want. This barrel, by the way, I got from Polyhaven. This isn't sponsored or anything. I just really like Polyhaven, so please check it out in the link in the description. They make HDRIs, textures, models, like a bunch of them just all for free, and they're all really high quality too. You can use them on literally anything, any way you want, which is just great. So yeah, you can get this barrel and any other model or texture HDRI in Polyhaven in the link below. So to fix up my barrel here, I'm going to go in the shaders tab here, the shading window, and you see I have all these textures, all these image textures plugged in here. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to go to each texture, and I'm just going to grab the texture that matches that, because it says it's looking for barrel.png, but it actually saved as a JPEG, so I have to go ahead and just switch it for the JPEG file. So I'm just going to do that for each one real quick. Now we have our barrel in our scene here, and we have our wall and floor working fine, but we still have a couple problems that need to be fixed. For one, if we start our thing here, we go frame by frame, see our dog's moving, but there's not really anything happening. We need the barrel to fall on the dog, which means that we need to give physics to the scene. So let's go and grab our floor here. We'll go to the physics settings, and we're going to give it a passive rigid body. So we're going to go rigid body and set the type to passive. We're going to do this for the wall as well. Our barrel also needs physics, so we're going to set physics, and we need the physics to be active because this needs to actually fall and move around. The mass can be whatever you think the mass is appropriate to be. You can just kind of play around with it until you get something good for your simulation. Oh, by the way, you can switch to the camera by using 0 on the number pad. That's how I've been switching in and out of the camera. So if you've been having trouble there, just remember to press 0 on the number pad, and that should switch you right into the camera. And if you, when I went into Shift tilde to a first person view, you can undo that to make it stop by just clicking on the mouse button, if you were having any trouble there. Here with our barrel, we need to, now we have physics on it, so if we move it up in our scene, like up here, and then we start, you can see it falls now, but that's kind of boring. It just hits the ground and doesn't really do anything. To get it to kind of move around when it falls, I'm just going to take the rotation of this, and I'm just going to rotate it just a bit on a few of the axes here, like so. Now when I start it, it's gonna fall, but it's going to, because it's kind of rotated a bit, it's gonna just kind of bounce around a bit, and that looks pretty nice. Now if we go into our camera view here, we can see it just kind of falls and it bounces like that. Nice. So you can see that here the barrel isn't quite lined up with my dog, so I can actually go, and I'm just going to zoom out here so I can see, so I can still in camera view, but I can actually see more of my scene because I'm zoomed out. And take my barrel, and I'm just going to move it on the x-axis so it's directly above my dog. Alright, now we have a nice simulation of our barrel falling and landing on our dog, but we're missing something. That being the lighting. The lighting does not match our actual original scene. I'm going to go to the camera settings, and I'm going to set this to back so you can actually see our simulation on top. And you can clearly see that the barrel does not match up with our original shot here. The lighting, the shadow is way too harsh. The shadow is not even the right direction. The light doesn't even look close to right. So first thing we're going to do is bring in an HDRI. This is going to make the lighting kind of match our scene. So go on to Polyhaven and just find a HDRI that looks similar to the environment that you recorded in. And then we're going to take the HDRI and just download that. And we're going to bring in here and go to the color tab here and set the color to an image texture. Then we're just going to open our HDRI. And already with an HDRI, our barrel looks like it fits in a little better. However, we have another problem here with the shadows. So we can just change that by deleting the default light here. And we're going to add in an area light. I'm going to go to my camera settings, make sure I can see the clip. So I'm going to put it in the front here. I'm going to actually set it all the way just so I can see where the light's coming from. So I can see the light in this shot, looking at the shadow of my dog. I can see the light seems to be coming from the right, and it seems to be relatively far away. And then we can actually get an idea of how our finished shot's going to look if we go to our camera, make sure we have our movie set to the back, go to 1, and then go into render mode. And now we can get a bit of a preview of what our finished shot is going to look like. We have the physics enabled, we have it fall onto our dog, and we have the lighting set up, and we have a transparent background. So now we need to get the render settings set up. So we're going to go here to output properties, make sure it's set to the right frame rate. I believe the frame rate in my original video was 30 FPS, so I'm going to click on that. Just whatever the FPS of your original clip that you're overlaying this onto is, just set it to that. And we do not want the output to be an MP4 file because this is going to have transparency. So instead we're going to set it to PNG, and make sure you set the colors to RGBA, that way it has an alpha channel. And then we're just going to go ahead and go to our output here and just make a folder specifically for all these images that you're going to render out. And make sure you have all your settings here correct, the resolution, the frame rate. Make sure you set the end to however long it takes for this to fall. And now what we're going to need to go to our scene properties, and we're going to go, and you can see rigid body world. You're going to open that up, see cache, open up the cache here, and set the end to however long your simulation is, and then click bake. And this is just going to save all the physics that you just made. I'm going to go to the performance here and make sure use tiling. So I'm using cycles, and if you're using cycles like I am for this, you need to make sure you're using GPU compute, so that you're using your graphic card for this. And in the memory here, in tile size, you can just find whatever tile size is good for your computer. I find 144 works best for me. And then once you have everything set up properly here, you should just be able to press Control F12. This will start to render your project out. I'll return when it is done rendering. Alright, now that your simulation is rendered, make a new project, go to video editing tab. If you don't already have video editing tab open, you can just go press the plus, add workspace, click video editing, and open a video editing workspace. Add in your clean plate. It's going to put a movie clip and an audio clip, but you don't need the audio clip unless you have audio for your shot. Now we're going to click Shift A, and you're going to see that it comes up with this thing, image sequence. You're going to want to click that, select all of the images from your image sequence, and for the start frame keep it at 1, and for the end frame type in the number of frames you have. I have 41, so I'm just going to put that in as 41, and I'm going to click add image strip, and it's going to put in a clip composed of the image sequence. You can see now when I scroll through this, I have this barrel fall. However, when it reaches the end, now the barrel disappears. So when it gets to this last frame, what I'm going to do is I just extend it, and it will stay on that last frame. So just extend it past the end there to however long you want your clip to be. Let's say we want this to be at 30 FPS. Let's say we want this to be a 4-second long video. Then we can just set it to 120 frames. Go to your end down here and set it to 120. Now when we hit play, we're going to see our barrel just kind of fall and sit there. And that looks pretty nice. And you can click Shift A while selecting it. Click Effect Strip and click Gaussian Blur. Well, I'd say right out here would be where I'd want to keyframe it at like 30, because this is where it's going to be the most blurred. And then at the very beginning, I'm going to keyframe it at like 5. That way it increases the blur as it falls, but we don't want it to stay blurred, so we're just gonna have, as it settles down on the frame where it stops moving, or at least like maybe a frame after, we're gonna set it to 0 motion blur. And now we're gonna have our barrel fall and land, and it's gonna have a bit of blur to it as well. Now the one problem with doing the motion blur in the editing instead of doing it just in the actual render is that it's going to blur the shadow a bit as well. However, if you have like soft shadows like this, you probably won't realize. However, we have another problem here. If you look, you'll notice that the lighting in my scene changes a bit, but the lighting on the barrel doesn't. We can fix that pretty easily by just making the clean plate to single image. So I can just go ahead and I'm gonna move the clean plate over the front here, and then I'm just gonna drag the back of it all the way here so that it's just one image and it doesn't change at all. However, obviously we're missing the fact that the dog needs to get squished. So how are we gonna do this? Well, we can start by finding the spot where the barrel would start hitting the dog. So let's bring in our regular clip here, and so where it hits the dog, we're just gonna cut this clip and delete. Press K to cut it and move the mouse over the side that you want to stay selected. So now I have my picture of my dog in here, but you'll notice that he's way too big. He's not the right size. So to fix this, I'll just take the transform settings here, and I will set the scale to 1 on all these, so he's regular size. But oh, now he's too small, so we'll just kind of play around with the scale until he's the right size. So we can just actually take our image, move it to the top, and we can just bring this 1 frame ahead, and then we can just kind of line this up. So I'm gonna go and do that real quick. Okay, now that I have my dog lined up, I'm going to place him right after this right here. And so now it's gonna cut to the image of my dog, and there's no shadow of him here, you'll notice. So I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate it, and I'm going to move all my clips up, and just to make sure they're only moving up, I'm going to press G to move them, and then I'm going to press Y so they only move up and do not move side to side. Then I'm going to click to move them here, and I'm going to move this new clip underneath. And this new clip that's underneath here, I'm going to call shadow. And to create the shadow, what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to move these 1 more up. And for the shadow, I'm going to move the position over a bit here. I'm going to rotate it a little. Just try to kind of get it lined up with his actual shadow. Then I'm going to go to the modifiers tab, and I'm going to add a color balance. And I'm just going to set all of these settings here to fully black, so that he's now just a completely black layer. And then we're just going to lower his opacity by like 0.5, and you'll notice that now it's already starting to look kind of like a shadow, but it's not quite right. So we can fix that by pressing Shift A and adding another blur. So then I'm going to take this, and I'm actually going to up the scale of the blur to like 50, because this is a very soft shadow. There. Now, it's not perfect by any means, but it's close enough to get the job done. It would probably be best to make this shadow after you've already animated your dog getting squished, but I was just doing that first so I could show you how to make that shadow there. So we're going to go frame by frame and just squish him. Okay, now I've animated my dog getting squished. Pretty basic animation, just him getting kind of flattened a bit. It's pretty simple. It doesn't have to be anything special, it just has to get the point across your dog getting squished. So this, some of this is pretty decent. Plus, if you want, you can also add a little bit of blood underneath. To do that, all you really need to do is find the frame where he hits, right? Maybe even 1 frame after, just add a bit of delay there. And take all your layers and move them up 1, and just add a blood image. Now obviously you need to change the transforms so that it fits properly. You can also go to the modifiers and do a hue correct here, and you can just kind of fix the saturation of the blood a bit. I want it to be pretty saturated because I want this to be pretty bloody blood. Add a white balance. Just pick the whitest thing in your scene, and that will just kind of make it fit a bit better in the scene. Color balance, and you can just kind of fiddle around with the colors here until you get something you like. Change these so that they kind of match the colors that are in the scene a bit, so that it looks almost like it has reflections of the other colors on it. You know, whatever's necessary to make it look like there's really blood there. Keyframe the scale here to be like when this is tipped up all the way to be at this scale, and then we can go back to the first frame and just kind of take that and divide it by 2, and that might be too slow. You know, we might want to change how fast that goes, so we can do that by dragging this up, and now we can see the keyframes on this. We click on this keyframe, press G to grab it, and we can move it so that the blood comes out of it quicker. That looks a lot nicer, I think. Our dog kind of disappears here, which we don't want, so we can just grab these and extend them to the end of the scene. You can hold down Control to get to snap like this, and now we should have a pretty decent animation of our dog getting squished.